The desperate signal, the silence of deep space, was broken by an alarm that would change the course of galactic history. Deep in the outer reaches of the Sol system, Titan Base hummed with the constant activity of humanity's most advanced monitoring station. Built into the frozen methane landscape of Saturn's largest moon, the facility served as humanity's ears to the galaxy, listening for any signs of intelligent life among the stars. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Walsh had been monitoring the deep space arrays for 6 years, ever since humanity had first made contact with the Galactic Council. Most days brought nothing more than cosmic background radiation and the occasional automated beacon from trading vessels. Today was different. The primary communication array suddenly erupted with signals unlike anything in their databases. Dr. Kevin Brooks rushed from his linguistics lab, coffee still steaming in his hands, as he stared at the incoming data streams. His team had spent years developing translation protocols for the 17 known alien languages in their sector. This signal was something entirely new. The mathematical patterns were complex but desperate, repeating in cycles that suggested extreme urgency. Sarah pulled up the signal analysis on her main display. The transmission originated from the Kepler system, nearly 60 light-years away, in a region that had been marked as containing primitive life forms. The signal strength suggested massive transmitters, the kind used for system-wide emergency broadcasts. Kevin worked frantically with his translation algorithms, cross-referencing the signal patterns with every known linguistic structure. After 3 hours of intensive analysis, the first coherent fragments began appearing on their screens. The words that emerged sent chills through the entire monitoring team. The message spoke of worlds consumed by an entity they called the Swarm. Entire planets had been drained of all life, leaving behind empty husks floating in space. The beings sending the signal identified themselves as the Zephyrian Confederation, a peaceful alliance of crystal-based life forms who had spent millennia building a harmonious civilization across 12 worlds. Sarah read the translated portions aloud to her team. The Zephyrians described how the swarm had appeared without warning, moving through their system like a plague. Their advanced technology, evolved over thousands of years of peaceful development, proved utterly useless against an enemy that seemed to feed on life itself. The most disturbing part of the message was its conclusion. The Zephyrians were down to their last refugee ships, fleeing toward the edge of their system, while the swarm consumed everything they had ever built. Their final transmission was a desperate plea to any species capable of receiving their signal, begging for help before their entire civilization vanished forever. Dr. Brooks continued refining the translation throughout the night, discovering additional layers of meaning hidden in the Zephyrian language. The aliens communicated through complex light patterns that carried emotional undertones as well as factual information. What came through clearly was their absolute terror of the swarm and their complete helplessness against it. Sarah immediately transmitted the findings to Admiral Sarah Chun at Fleet Command on Luna. The response came back within hours, marked with the highest priority classifications. Humanity's position in the galactic community was still tenuous. They were the newcomers, the species from the Deathworld that most aliens viewed with mixture of curiosity and caution. The debate in the Terran council chambers lasted for 2 full days. Some argued that humanity should avoid getting involved in alien conflicts, focusing instead on building their own defenses. Others insisted that this was exactly the kind of situation where humanity could prove its worth to the galactic community. Admiral Chun had served in the colonial wars and understood the weight of command decisions. She stood before the council, her silver hair catching the artificial sunlight streaming through the dome. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had seen civilizations rise and fall. She spoke about humanity's unique position in the galaxy. While other species had evolved on worlds with stable climates and predictable conditions, Earth had forged its children in chaos. Hurricanes, earthquakes, ice ages, and mass extinctions had created a species that thrived in crisis situations. If the swarm truly was as dangerous as the Zephyrians claimed, then humanity's hard-won survival skills might be exactly what was needed. The vote was close, but the decision was made. Humanity would respond to the Zephyrian distress call. This would be their first major military operation as members of the galactic community, and failure would likely mean the end of human expansion beyond their solar system. Captain Marcus. Steele received his orders while reviewing tactical reports in his quarters aboard the TDS Defiance. The ship was typical of human engineering philosophy, built to survive anything the universe could throw at it rather than to look elegant. Its hull was scarred from asteroid impacts and solar flares, but every system had multiple backups and the weapons were designed for maximum destructive efficiency. Steele had grown up in the outer colonies, where equipment failure meant death, and there was no room for technological elegance. His crew reflected the same pragmatic approach to survival. They were veterans of border conflicts and deep space emergencies, people who knew how to improvise solutions when everything went wrong. Human fleet that assembled at Mars consisted of 12 vessels, each one a testament to humanity's refusal to accept defeat. While alien ships were marvels of efficient design, human vessels looked like they had been built in salvage yards. They were crude, heavily armed, and powered by fusion reactors that other species considered dangerously unstable. Commander Elena Rodriguez led the engineering corps with ships that could rebuild, themselves using raw materials scavenged from asteroid fields. Her vessels carried fabrication equipment that could turn space debris into functional spacecraft components. The philosophy was simple. If you can't make it elegant, make it unbreakable. Dr. Jennifer Hayes commanded the science division, bringing mobile laboratories equipped to study alien technology and biology. Her team included specialists in xenobiology, theoretical physics, and combat medicine. They were prepared for anything from first contact protocols to battlefield surgery in zero-gravity. As the fleet prepared for the long jump to the Kepler system, Steele addressed his combined crews over the communication network. He spoke about humanity's reputation as survivors, about their ability to find solutions when faced with impossible odds. This mission would test everything they had learned about adapting to hostile environments. The jump drives engaged simultaneously, tearing holes in space-time that allowed the human fleet to cross vast distances in days rather than decades. As the stars shifted around them, Steele couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into something far beyond their understanding. The Zephyrian distress calls had grown weaker with each transmission, and long-range sensors were detecting energy patterns in their destination system that defied known physics. 3 days into the journey, the worst fears were confirmed. The Zephyrian distress signal suddenly cut off in the middle of a transmission. When the communication arrays tried to re-establish contact, they found only empty space where a thriving civilization had once broadcast its desperate plea for help. Asterisk. First contact protocol. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system to find a graveyard of worlds. What should have been a thriving solar system with 12 inhabited planets was now a collection of dark, lifeless spheres orbiting a star that seemed dimmer than it should have been. Long-range sensors detected no energy signatures, no electromagnetic emissions, no signs that billions of intelligent beings had ever existed here. Captain Steele stood on the bridge of the Defiance, studying the tactical displays with growing unease. The sensor readings showed that each planet was intact, with no signs of bombardment or conventional warfare. Whatever had happened here was far more thorough than mere destruction. It was as if life itself had simply been erased from existence. Dr. Hayes worked with her xenobiology team to analyze the atmospheric readings from the dead worlds. The planets still had breathable atmospheres and stable climates, but every trace of organic matter had vanished. There were no cities, no ruins, no fossils in the geological record. It was as if the Zephyrian civilization had been deleted from reality itself. Commander Rodriguez deployed her engineering scouts to investigate the orbital infrastructure. They found space stations and manufacturing platforms still in perfect condition, their hulls intact and their systems functional. But there was no power, no activity, no signs that anyone had ever operated these facilities. The technology was there, but the civilization that had built it was gone without a trace. The breakthrough came when Communications Officer David Park detected a faint signal from the system's asteroid belt. Hidden among the rocky debris was a single ship, its energy signature barely registering on their sensors. The vessel was clearly of Zephyrian design, its crystalline hull reflecting what little starlight penetrated the asteroid field. Steele made the decision to approach personally, leading a small shuttle team to make contact with what might be the last survivors of an entire civilization. The alien ship was massive, easily 10 times larger than their shuttle, but showed obvious signs of battle damage. Sections of its crystal hull were dark and lifeless, while others pulsed with weak patterns of colored light. The docking procedure required careful coordination between human and alien technologists. The Zephyrian airlock was designed for beings with very different physiology, requiring the human team to wear environmental suits even though the atmosphere was breathable. As they entered the alien vessel, they were struck by the beauty of its construction. Everything was made of living crystal that conducted light and sound in patterns that were both functional and artistic. The corridors sang with harmonic frequencies as they walked, and the walls displayed shifting patterns of color that seemed to respond to their presence. It was technology that treated science and art as the same discipline. They found the survivors. In the ship's central chamber, a vast space filled with crystal formations that hummed with barely contained energy. The Zephyrians were unlike anything in human experience. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, their translucent bodies channeled patterns of light that served as both communication and emotional expression. Elder Moran, their leader, greeted the humans with a display of colors that Dr. Hayes' translation. Equipment interpreted as profound relief mixed with desperate hope. The first successful communication between their species came through mathematical patterns projected onto crystal surfaces, gradually building into more complex exchanges of information. The story that Elder Moran shared was worse than anything the humans had imagined. The swarm had arrived without warning, appearing not as ships or creatures, but as distortions in space itself. They moved between worlds like living shadows, consuming everything they touched. But they didn't destroy in any conventional sense. They drained the life essence from everything they encountered, leaving behind empty matter that retained its form but lost all meaning. Dr. Hayes worked frantically to understand the feeding process that Elder Moran described. The swarm entities existed partially outside normal spacetime, feeding on what the Zephyrian called the life pattern that connected all conscious beings to the universe. When they consumed a world, they didn't just kill its inhabitants. They erased their very existence from the fabric of reality. The Zephyrians had tried everything to stop the swarm. Their crystalline technology was incredibly advanced, capable of manipulating matter at the quantum level. But their weapons and shields were useless against entities that attacked the fundamental connections between consciousness and existence. Every defensive strategy failed because the swarm fed on the very order and harmony that made Zephyrian civilization possible. Captain Steele listened to the translation with growing understanding. The Zephyrians were perfect beings in many ways, their technology efficient and their society harmonious. That perfection made them ideal targets for entities that fed on organized consciousness. Humanity's chaotic nature, which other species often viewed as a weakness, might actually be their greatest strength against this threat. Elder Moran confirmed Steele's suspicions with a light display that translated as bitter hope. The Zephyrians had studied the galactic database entries about humanity, fascinated by the reports of beings who thrived in chaos and disorder. Human neural patterns were so random and unpredictable that they might create interference in the swarm's feeding process. The revelation led to intense discussions between the human and Zephyrian leaders. Commander Rodriguez realized that human technology, with its crude inefficiency and chaotic energy patterns, might be naturally resistant to whatever force the swarm used to drain their victims. Their fusion reactors created exactly the kind of electromagnetic interference that could disrupt the entity's feeding process. Dr. Hayes made an even more disturbing discovery. While analyzing the data from the consumed worlds, the swarm entities weren't random destroyers. They showed signs of intelligence and purpose, moving through the galaxy in patterns that suggested they were searching for something specific. The consumption of entire civilizations wasn't random feeding, but part of some larger design. The moment of revelation was interrupted by proximity alarms throughout both fleets. Long-range sensors detected massive gravitational distortions approaching from the outer system, moving through space in ways that violated every known law of physics. The space between stars was beginning to darken and twist, as if reality itself was being consumed by something that existed in the gaps between normal matter. Elder Moran's light patterns flashed in colors that needed no translation. Fear, pure, absolute terror at the approach of entities that had already consumed 12 worlds and billions of lives. The swarm had finally tracked down the last Zephyrian refugees, and now they were coming for the humans as well. Captain Steele returned to his ship as the first swarm entities materialized at the edge of the system. They weren't creatures in any sense that human minds could easily process. They were voids in reality itself, moving wounds in space-time that brought with them a darkness that was more than the absence of light. It was the absence of existence itself. As the human fleet prepared for battle against an enemy that existed partially outside the universe, Steele realized they were about to discover whether humanity's chaotic nature was truly their salvation, or if they were simply the next course in the swarm's cosmic feast. The battle for the survival of consciousness in their region of the galaxy was about to begin, and the outcome would determine the fate of every thinking being within 1,000 light years. The first phase of humanity's greatest test was over. Now they would learn if their reputation as Deathworlders was enough to face down entities that fed on the very essence of existence itself.